Today, I'm going to show you how to take your Sweet Child of Mine intro riff from sounding like this to sounding like this. Alright, welcome. In this lesson, I want to show you a number of things that are happening in the Sweet Child of Mine intro riff that I feel like nobody talks about. There are loads of videos explaining how to play it, where to put your fingers. So this is not going to be a lesson where I sort of walk through what the notes are to the part. There are loads of videos like that already. But in this video, I want to talk about a number of things that basically are going on behind the scenes, things that you don't really see when you look at someone playing it on guitar straight on. The things I'm going to cover today will really help you take it from that amateur sounding kind of plink plonk to a pro sound that you can rely on. So let's waste no time. Let me show you the first of these things. All right, so the first thing we need to do is think about our hand position. And this is a nice simple one, but you'll see that all the other tips I'm going to give you here, they basically follow on from this. This is a really important thing to get right. So the hand position for Sweet Child. So we're up at the 12th fret, but your hand is not going to be straight on like this with your fingers straight across the board. You might consider a kind of normal playing position. It's not going to be like that. It's actually going to be more like that, coming in from the side. You will see Slash do this. If you look up videos of Slash, you'll see that that's a pretty normal hand position for him. There's a lot of good reasons why. So that's the first thing that you need to think about, is adjusting from straight on to the side. I'll give you a quick reason why right now. When you come down and you've got this 15, 14, 14, 14, you're going to find that there's basically not space for your fingers to be there unless you're tilted to the side. So that's point number one. Get those fingers coming in diagonally from the side. All right, now the second thing, I think this is the main thing. I think this will make the biggest difference for you if you've had problems with this riff. So this is a very exposed riff. What I mean by that is, well, basically there's nothing else playing. It's completely solo in the song. The band does eventually come in, but you know, Slash plays that a good number of times with absolutely no backing. So when you think about how you're actually going to do that, you need to take real care not to hit the wrong strings, or else that's going to sound really bad. Well, you might have thought with riffs like this that you simply need to have extremely accurate picking and make no mistakes. And of course you do want your picking to be as accurate as it can be, but there's something else going on that's basically like an insurance policy against hitting a wrong note. And it's this: the first finger, the index finger right here. This is actually trailing over all the higher strings. It's touching the higher strings and it's acting like a mute. You hear that? So that's me playing the 12th fret of D, the first note of this. And hopefully you can hear there. See, this is what I'm talking about. You don't see this from front on. So I'm going to change my angle. So perhaps from this angle, you can see how flat my finger is. That's what you want, flatness. Not arching, like they say in textbooks, but flat fingers so that you can mute the string. And what that's going to do is basically shut off unwanted noise from the other strings, so that even if you happen to glance them, they're not going to come through, okay? It's not going to be this big, horrible, bad note coming through. Now, I just want to emphasize that's not a sort of replacement for good, accurate picking. You always want to try and make your picking as accurate as it can be, but the guitar is basically the noisiest instrument there is. I mean, when you've got distortion on, I'll put on some distortion. Okay, I'm not even fretting anything. You basically just need to take your fingers off the fretboard, and it makes a huge noise. Okay, there's no getting around the fact that the guitar is a noisy instrument, but the solution to this is in your fingers. It's mainly in your left-hand fingers, okay? It's not something that you need to buy a piece of equipment to sort out. It's not something that you need a noise gate for, or one of these fret wrap things, okay? It's to do with your fingering technique. And this is how you solve it. That's me with my distortion on big time now. And you can hear, even if I hit all those strings, you're only hearing that one note. And that's perfect for what we want for this riff. So mute your strings with your first finger as you play this. Get that first finger nice and flat and get it resting on all the higher strings. That will clean up this part hugely. All right, the third thing here is a little technique that's a very, very important technique, but again, it's not really talked about that much. It's just sort of assumed that that's what people do. They don't really tend to specify. So when you've played the first part of the riff twice, it switches to that note there. That's the 14th fret of D. Now, if you look at the tab, you'll notice that the note that you play right before that is the 14th fret of the G string. So you're going like that. You're going from... Now, unless you know how to approach that, you're going to end up with a nasty little gap there that's going to sound just really unprofessional. It's going to cause a kind of halt right in the middle of the riff. What you need to do, like I was saying, these tips are all related. So the flatness of the fingers is really important here, because when you fret that final 14th on the G string, right before you go to D, you need to use a technique called rolling. And rolling is when you roll your finger from one string to the next. Rolling is how you do maneuvers like this, where you've got a string change, but you've got the same fret. If you don't roll, you have to just jump, kind of hop over it, and it sounds quite bad. I'm sure you can hear that. You hear that gap? We don't want that. We want a completely seamless passage of notes. So how we do that is when we're coming up to that 14th fret and we're about to make that change, we're going to go super flat on that note. And then when you raise your knuckle like this, that last knuckle right there, if you're flat on that first note, when you raise that, you will find that your finger will pop over onto the D string and there'll be no gap. Let me play the riff slow while doing that. I'm exaggerating the motion a wee bit. Let me do it again. And we're okay for the next chord there. That doesn't feature rolling, but it's between the first and the second part where you change from 14 to 14. You need to roll over that. I joke that finger rolling technique is like the most important technique that nobody ever talks about. And it's because it's not flashy. It's not like, hey, you know, some cool technique, you know, it's not some wicked fast kind of cool thing, some new fun kind of item. It's just a really, really core part of technique. It's incredibly important for getting a smooth sound, and it's super important to be smooth on this riff. That's what people want to hear. And the last main tip that I have for this riff and getting it to sound good is to keep your fingers moving. What I've seen a lot of people try and do is, and I know why they're doing it, but they're basically, they keep their fingers on the board. So there's just a very sticky, heavy feel to the fingers. I know what people are doing. They're trying to be efficient, basically. They're trying to save wasted motion because a lot of the notes repeat. And I get that, but that's not actually the right way to approach this. You want to have movement. You can see my fingers are moving all the time. After a note's played, it's released. And basically, this lets the fingers move far more freely. And in comparison to keeping fingers down on the board, that makes your fingers extremely tense over a little bit of time. And this is a real endurance riff. It goes on and it goes on. Okay, so you really don't want that kind of like your fingers almost seizing up. Well, that's what happens if you try and take that. It's one of these false shortcuts. I've done all these things, by the way. It's just that after years and years of doing it, I've worked out some more efficient ways, or I've worked out what's actually efficient and what's actually a shortcut and what's actually a dead end, basically, and actually makes things worse over the long term. So get those fingers moving. And I would say probably nowhere is that more important than the end section of this lead riff. And that's sort of a tip in itself, okay? Learn the end section. Don't just learn the really, really famous part that we all know and love, okay? Because if you don't know the end section and you try and play it, it'll just sort of peter out and you'll be stood there like, oh, you know, you'll be caught short. It's a little bit embarrassing. So definitely get that end section, which is off of the main riff. And you can see all of those tips coming into action there. I've got a diagonal angle with the fingers so that there's space, so they're not competing for space, especially here. And the fingers are all moving after each note's been played. You can see how much movement is in there. That's trying to eliminate that tension creeping in, holding down frets when they don't need to be, so that things can just move along nicely. So there are a couple of things that I think are less important here, that are sometimes made sort of too much of a big deal of, basically. And those are picking and fingering. Okay, so a lot of people would ask me, you know, should I be playing this with these three fingers, like my pinky, basically, or can I get away with that? So you'll have noticed I play it with the first three fingers, okay? I have a little sort of personal rule of thumb that I like to follow with fingering. So my rule of thumb is when I get above the 12th fret, double dotted one, and I'm playing pentatonic based stuff, I will sort of +1 onto the traditional fingering rules. So rather than like that, I don't play pentatonics like that up high if I'm playing E minor pentatonic. I don't do that. I think the frets are too small and that just feels artificial. I use my third finger, ring finger, to do it. Okay, so I don't think that matters too much. I think that's a case of what feels comfortable. You can do it both ways. If you feel like you're really stretching with those three, then that's bad, and you probably should use the pinky. But you don't need to force yourself to use the pinky. I don't believe Slash does that. I think he uses the first three fingers. So that's absolutely fine. That's not something that you need to worry about big time. The other thing that doesn't really matter, at least when you're learning the riff and getting it down, is the picking. Basically, it's not that fast, this riff. You can actually down pick every note. I'm not recommending that. I would recommend alternate picking. Just down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. I think that's the best solution for this riff, but it's like I say, it's less important. It's less important than these other things. The angle of your fingers, the fact that you're muting the strings to kill that noise because you're on high gain. You only need to look the wrong way at your guitar and it makes a great big racket. So angle, muting, rolling to get that smoothness between notes, and keeping the fingers moving through the riff rather than trying to pin yourself onto notes that you've already played and that are going to come up again shortly. Just moving. Releasing notes after you've played them. Those are the things that I think make the biggest difference here. I hope you've enjoyed this video and found it useful. If you have found it useful, leave a like or a comment. This really helps the video be seen. So if this video has been useful for you, leaving a like or a comment will help YouTube to suggest this video to other players like you so that they can see it for themselves and they can get these tips. And if you found the video helpful, consider subscribing to the channel. Hit the red button and the bell and you'll get notifications whenever I put out more videos in future. Thanks for stopping by today, and I hope to see you again soon. Cheers.